Hello, my people. Is it story day again? Are you excited? I'm so excited. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. I tell stories every single week. You can be one of my people. Click the like button because thumbs up is thumbs up. Oh man, today's story, I'm gonna wrap myself out. I know you guys, I know it's gonna be hard to believe. I'm not perfect, guys. Not perfect. I know. It was a shock to me as well. But it's okay. We're gonna get through it, okay? Today's story comes from when I was in junior high, and what I learned in junior high was that you didn't necessarily have to be good at the homework if you were good at diplomacy. So for instance, I may not do all of my homework, but if I talk a good enough game and explain my knowledge of the subject, then maybe the teacher will allow it to slide by. It didn't always work, but it worked more times than it should have. I was always far too busy to be doing homework at home. It was a waste of time. If I couldn't get it done at school, unless it was a big paper or some giant project, I really didn't see any need to do work at home of a school-like nature. That's why we have school. Come to find out, fast forward a few years, and now the teachers aren't giving the kids homework because they realize it's just a waste of time and that the parents wind up doing it for them anyway, and a bunch of what... Why didn't you guys know this when I was a kid? Come on, teachers. I'm kidding, I love you teachers. Anyways, back then they would give homework, but I would not do it. I had to take speech class, and the problem with speech class was not at all that you had to speak. In fact, I have zero of the problems of talking in front of people. Doesn't faze me in the least. Shocker, I know. It was the memorizing of the speeches that I wasn't a big fan of. So I would do my best to learn a little bit, but what they called speech class was my introduction to drama. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but when you're acting, you are pretending. You are portraying something other than what truly exists. Some might say lying, but those would be some haters, and I don't need any of those around. No need for haters. I was a big fan of the acting part of things, and so when my teacher had this speech that we had to memorize, she gave us a list of like 5 speeches. All of them were so long. So long. I looked to find the shortest one in case I could memorize it, but I just wasn't interested because there's other things happening in the world, none of which involve speeches that I want to memorize. So I chose a speech by Patrick Henry, and the reason I chose it was because I had heard it on Bugs Bunny cartoons, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, and I thought, hey, that sounds like a good speech to memorize. Now, if this was actually drama class and I had to memorize that monologue, I probably would have been more into it, but it was a speech. I didn't want to give the speech. So what I did was memorize the first few words and the last few words. And I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do for the other like 1,200 words of that speech, but whatever it was going to be awesome. My last name is Taylor, so always I would go towards the end of these things. They'd go in alphabetical order, and I always had to wait until day 3 or 4 to get to my turn. And on the first couple days, having not memorized my speech and thinking to myself, this is like 75% of your grade, maybe I should memorize the speech, but that's a lot of work. I don't know if I want to do that. I noticed that the teacher would feed them lines if they got tripped up on one of the lines. And when I was in school, I would take all these little different nuggets of information and I'd just tuck them back in the little supercomputer. So I knew that she would feed me a couple of lines if I didn't know where I was going, but I literally knew the first sentence and the last sentence, and I didn't think she was gonna feed me all of those sentences. So I continued to think and plot and plan and figure out how I could not have to memorize this speech. Now looking back at it, it probably was easier and would have been a cooler thing to have under my belt to have memorized the speech, especially if I would have held on to it and retained it and been able to just bust out Patrick Henry right here. That would be kind of cool if I could just rattle this whole thing off. But I thought it would be better if I figured out how to not have to do that. So as the days continue on and people continue to do their speeches and I hear this speech in its entirety, which is like 8 minutes long if you're talking at a normal clip, I just have the first and last sentence memorized. So I'm really not gonna do very well because everyone else is memorizing this speech. Everyone else has it. And I'm just thinking to myself, I should really memorize this speech. But instead, I decided to commit to the role of a lifetime. I would do any and everything that was necessary to create the disorientation, the failure of memory of the speech. I would start out strong, I would start out noble and ready to go. Something would take place, and then I would lose my train of thought. Even though fair teacher was feeding me information, alas, I couldn't get there, and I would end on a high note. Give me liberty or give me death. As predicted, my day came where I was to perform my speech. Mr. President, no man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. As I said house, I leaned forward on the podium. This was no normal podium. Wide and had shelves in the middle of it, and you couldn't see inside. It was metal, really heavy. The top was made of this really heavy wood. And as I leaned forward, the most fortuitous of circumstances unfolded. The top of the podium slides forward as well. Apparently, it was removable. But as I slide forward, it slides forward, which throws me off my balance, and I fall forward. Not actually intending to fall forward, but actually falling forward. The podium begins to tip, the top of the thing falls off onto the ground, I go falling into the podium, onto the ground, I'm like lodged in the different shelves, I'm on the ground, everybody is laughing and gasping, and I'm just like, ah! The teacher jumps up and runs over there, I kind of get up and I'm like holding my arm, and I'm, oh my gosh. But in my mind, I'm thinking, victory belongs to Mateo. And I look, and the teacher's feeding me the next lines, and I kind of like look at her and I kind of wince a little bit and sell it a little harder. Give me liberty or give me death. And the class goes wild. You would not have been mistaken to have mistaken me as Mr. Patrick Henry addressing Congress and everybody just being fired up at the fact that I just said give me liberty or give me death. But you still would have been mistaken because I was not Mr. Henry, I was Mr. Taylor. I limp back to my desk and I sit down and everybody's concerned and everybody's freaking out. Bell rings, she says, Matt, hang on a second. And she must have been related to Superman because she had some x-ray vision on my scheme that had just gone down. You don't know that speech, do you, Mr. Taylor? Madam, my wounds and blood loss are causing memory lapses. I will see you at lunch on Friday where you will perform a speech. It doesn't have to be that speech, but you need to perform a speech. I literally walked into her classroom during lunch. No one else was there, just me and her. Stood at the podium and said, here it is, a groove slightly transformed. Just a bit of a break from the norm. Just a little something to break the monotony of all that hardcore dance that has gotten to be a little bit out of control. It's cool to dance, but what about a groove that soothes and moves romance? Give me a soft, subtle mix, and if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. Think of the summers of the past, adjust the bass, and let the Alpine blast. Pop in my CD and let me run a rhyme. Put your car on cruise and lay back, cause this is summertime. I did the whole song and I don't think that she knew what it was. Thank you, Fresh Prince, for bailing me out of speech class. Give me liberty or let the podiums fall. As always, my people, have a fantastic week. Keep telling stories.